Japan trip spiraled from Michelin-starred dining to sleep deprivation, culminating in a motorcycle crash, surgeries, and a shower blackout. After dreaming of visiting Japan for years, I finally made it happen last year. I bought my tickets, carefully booked my vacation months ahead, and dove into planning what promised to be the trip of a lifetime. I arrived in Milan the night before departure, October 16th, soaked in excitement and anticipation. To celebrate, I took 2 of my 3 friends out to a Michelin-starred Japanese restaurant. The third was lucky enough to have scored tickets to a concert. The plan was simple but brilliant: sample the best Japanese food offered at home, then compare it to the real deal once I landed in Japan. The meal was incredible, but sleep was not. Our B&B was unbearably noisy, and none of us got any rest worth mentioning. Running on reserves, we made it to the airport an easy 4 hours ahead of time and breezed onto our flight, CA 950, bound for Beijing. That leg passed uneventfully. The layover, however, was a different story. Beijing was tense. The air was thick with the stress of travel. It didn't help when a Chinese security officer suddenly started screaming at me, scrutinizing my pockets for whatever apparently suspicious thing I had. It turned out to be nothing more than a candy wrapper. Security eventually cleared, we made our gate, and I finally boarded CA 925 to Tokyo. After about 18 hours in transit, I landed at Narita Airport a little before 2 p.m. on October 18th, beyond exhausted but buzzing with adrenaline. My friends and I hustled straight to our hotel in Shibuya for a shower and to drop our bags. I could feel the sleep deprivation deep in my bones, so I suggested a short rest before dinner. My friends had other plans. No. We're in Japan. Let's go for a walk right now. So much for resting. I felt like an old man, dragging myself out into the pulsing Shibuya streets after roughly 36 hours without real sleep. We met up with a friend who'd moved to Japan years ago. She became our guide, deftly showing us the local side of Shibuya, away from the tourist traps. Dinner was at a spot where, as she said, gaijin don't usually go. The food was phenomenal. Afterward, the night was still young, so we went to a bar hidden away on a Shibuya side street, pure local flavor, alive with dancing and laughter. My gin and tonics were mostly ice, but I was so physically spent, I barely felt the alcohol. I managed to de-escalate a brewing brawl between 2 enormous Russian guys, no small feat considering their size, but as a 100 kilograms powerlifter, I can hold my own. I surprised myself by making friends with them before we slipped back out into the night. It was late, 1:30 a.m., when our guide caught a taxi home while my friends and I decided our hotel was walking distance. She'd said taxis were rare this time of night, so when I spotted one idling on the far side of the intersection, we made a snap decision to seize the chance. At that moment, I happened to look up at a building opposite us and spotted what looked like a strange, ghostly figure staring down from a dim upper floor. Even now, I'm not sure what it was. I assumed just a creepy mannequin, but it unsettled me, sent a chill up my spine. I even snapped a photo of it. The street was empty. The pedestrian signal glowed red, but there was barely a sliver left. The traffic light for cars was already red. Sizing up the scene, we agreed to make a Beatles-style dash across the crosswalk. I barely made it halfway. Right behind me, one of my friends heard a strange noise, but none of us saw what was coming. He yelled, "Watch out!" Heart racing, I tried to sprint the last few steps, just half a meter from the curb. Suddenly, the world spun wildly. Lights, buildings, everything whipped past as if I was tumbling inside a washing machine. Next thing I knew, I was on the ground, dazed, not immediately feeling pain, just confusion. Pieces of motorcycle bodywork were scattered around me. My friend rushed over, panicked. I tried to pick myself up, propping myself up with my left arm. Only then did the pain start to seep in. When I tried to move my left leg, I saw that only the top part of my femur responded, the lower part simply stayed behind. Broken femur, without a doubt. A dull ache radiated up the arm that had braced my fall. Something was definitely wrong there too. When I switched arms to prop myself up, I became aware of sharp pain near my collarbone. Broken clavicle, I guessed, and I was right. My hand was bleeding profusely, a deep gash between my middle and ring fingers, probably from where I struck the motorcycle. I took in the scene as the pieces came together. I had been struck by a black motorcycle, which my friends and bystanders later swore was traveling at about 70 kilometers per hour, 45 miles per hour, in the dark, with its headlights off. Shaken, bloodied, and battered, my first question was about the other guy. "How's the rider?" It took a minute before anyone answered. Eventually, I was told he'd briefly lost consciousness from the impact but regained it almost immediately and was, shockingly, okay. His 800cc Yamaha was in pieces on the street. An ambulance arrived within minutes. The paramedic spoke some English, but my friend translated anyway. A police officer showed up, hopped into the ambulance, and immediately asked me about alcohol. Honestly, I answered, 1 beer, 2 gin and tonics. He stepped away, made a call, and my friend overheard his words: "A drunk gaijin caused an accident. He has insurance, he'll sort it out." My friends had to hold her back from going off on the guy. No official report. No statement. No investigation. Problem, as far as the locals were concerned, vanished. The foreigner would handle it with his insurance, and the rider would deal with his bike. At Shibuya Hospital, I was admitted straight to the ER. They put me through full-body CT scans and stitched up my hand. By now, it was morning, October 19th. I sent 2 of my friends off to continue their vacation, while one loyal friend remained to help me, staying at our local friend's apartment. The hospital scheduled my femur surgery for the following Monday, October 21st, and planned the clavicle surgery for a week later. The nurses were absolute angels, doing their best to communicate using some strange Asian translation app, not Google Translate, that peppered every conversation with K-pop ads and hilariously botched translations. At one point, the app cut off in mid-sentence, cheerfully declaring, "Kelly is drunk," which cracked us up. The app also failed hilariously with Japanese's elusive subjects, so I was treated to messages like, "I have to take my pants off," making me laugh in spite of everything. Didn't realize it was that kind of hospital, honestly. As Monday rolled around at 1 p.m., they wheeled me in for surgery, the surreal start to my unforgettable Japanese odyssey. I was wheeled into the operating room for what would become 9 grueling hours of surgery. 4 bags of blood, a 38 cm titanium rod, 6 screws, and a metal clamp. My femur was being pieced back together. When I finally came out around 10 p.m., the anesthesia left me totally wiped out, but by the next day I was surprisingly okay, except my foot was paralyzed. The doctors told me a nerve was being compressed by the swelling. I watched my foot, willing it to move, and after a couple days, it finally twitched. I can't even describe the relief I felt in that moment. The week after, just before my clavicle surgery, the hospital staff wheeled me into what they called the shower room for a wash. Honestly, I could barely sit upright in the wheelchair, and the level of pain radiating from my foot was unlike anything I'd felt, like fiery needles stabbing, from the inside out. Oddly, my leg didn't hurt much. Then, the nurse pointed at the stool where I was meant to sit, tiny enough that one of my thighs could have swallowed it whole. With great difficulty, I perched myself there. The shower room was just a hard, nondescript space with a bathtub in the center. The nurse gestured that she was going to remove my fore. I tried to protest, pointing out my surgery the next day, but she ignored me. With no warning, she yanked the fourth straight out. No pressure, no cotton ball, nothing. Blood immediately spilled everywhere. She froze, panicked, the needle still in her hand as blood pooled on the floor. Taking matters into my own hand, I grabbed the spongy elastic netting from her grip and quickly pressed it to my arm, staunching the bleeding myself. She just murmured, "Oh. Okay." As if I'd performed some magic. While all this chaos was going on, I realized something even worse. Earlier, during my transfer from bed to wheelchair, one of the fractured pieces of my clavicle had snapped out of place and was now jutting upward, basically locking my left arm entirely. Despite it all, the nurse showered me as best as she could, soap on my arms, shampoo in my hair. She asked, "Okay?" And, resigned, I motioned for the soap and handled the rest myself with my only good arm. As the ordeal was wrapping up, she gestured for me to stand and move to the wheelchair. I stared at the floor, slick stone, soapy and wet. I had one working arm, one working leg, and weighed 100 kilograms. My nurse couldn't have broken 40 kilograms even soaking wet. And the stool was just above the ground, making leverage impossible. I mimed that I'd need a battalion to help me up. With a huff, she left, returning with 4 more nurses. The oldest, clearly the ringleader, spotted a heavy metal platform at the back of the room. She wheeled it over and locked it, providing something for me to grab. With 4 nurses bracing me, I tried to rise. I was almost upright when my titanium-laden leg slid out from under me and crashed into the bathtub. 5 nurses scrambled to catch me. I looked at the nurse who had thought I could do this alone. My stare said everything. Sometime after, they operated on my clavicle, a much shorter 2-hour procedure. Life adopted a strange rhythm of hospital routines. The doctors insisted I stay at least 45 days before flying, but I pushed hard in my physical therapy, determined to get home. In the end, the English-speaking surgeon relented. I proved I could endure a wheelchair and survive a long flight. He cleared me to leave the following week. When I looked for flights, I felt uneasy. I checked the forecast. Sure enough, Typhoon Kong-Ray was barreling directly for Tokyo right on my intended departure date, November 2nd. I switched to November 4th instead and got to enjoy the storm from my hospital window. Watching it rage over the city, I knew I'd made the right call. Finally, November 4th arrived and I was discharged at 2 p.m. My friend met me outside, waiting with fresh sushi and a bottle of sake as a parting gift. The sushi was the best I'd ever had, one bright spot before I left Japan behind. Later, I boarded my flight from Haneda to Istanbul, business class so I could keep my battered leg straight. Takeoff was noisy but uneventful, until 10 minutes in, when I spotted the pilot rushing into economy class, looking worried. That was enough to set me on edge, but hours passed without any explanation and I even managed to fall asleep. When I awoke and glanced at the flight map, my stomach dropped. We were heading back to Tokyo. Questions yielded nothing. Then, the pilot finally admitted there were technical problems, and crossing the ocean didn't feel safe with the state of our engines. They would check them at Haneda, but if anything was wrong, the flight would be cancelled. We landed and waited. Ultimately, the engines failed inspection. Our flight was cancelled. At the ticket counter, they offered a 2-week refund for my €8,500 ticket and told us to book another flight ourselves. I refused. I stood my ground and demanded a hotel and a new ticket home. After a tense 2-hour standstill, they finally booked us a new route from Nerida to Istanbul on November 6, then to Venice, and comped us a stay at the Hilton Nerida and Istanbul's airport hotel. Finally, at the Hilton, I slept deeply for the first time in ages. The new flight went smoothly until our approach to Istanbul. The wind was so fierce that the plane was nearly sideways, lining up with the runway at an angle. The landing was turbulent, bottles and objects flew forward. Everyone was shaken, but no one was hurt. Then, at the crowded Istanbul airport, another challenge surfaced. No one spoke English. I whipped out my phone for Google Translate, but the airport Wi-Fi only gave me 30 free minutes, which I'd burned texting home. Airport staff wheeled me through endless corridors. I had no clue where we were going. Suddenly, I recalled the company eSIM on my phone, restarted the Wi-Fi timer, and downloaded the Turkish language pack on Google Translate. At last, I managed to communicate with the staff and learned we were heading to the airport hotel. Checking in was a hassle. They hadn't realized I was in a wheelchair, but finally, they sorted it out and gave me an accessible smart room on the first floor. I sighed in relief as I entered. The shower had sturdy support handles, and for the first time since my ordeal began, I felt something close to comfortable. Bars and a chair anchored to the wall welcomed me, finally giving me the chance to take a real shower after what felt like an eternity. I maneuvered myself onto the sturdy shower chair, turned on the hot water, and planned to spend a luxurious hour rinsing away the clinging hospital smell and the exhaustion from everything I'd been through. Half an hour melted away in a haze of steam. I was soapy, relaxed, and all was right with the world, until the room plunged into darkness. It turned out the hotel's smart home system was a bit too clever for its own good. There were motion sensors, and if they didn't register movement for 30 minutes, every single light in the place would turn off to save energy. So, there I was, naked, soapy, and half paralyzed, sitting under the now eerily dark stream of hot water for what felt like 5 eternal minutes. I was completely alone with my options. Should I ring the emergency bell and let some random Turkish employee find me stark naked in the shower? Should I somehow lower myself onto the wet tile and crawl to the door, risking life and limb and what little dignity I had left? As I pondered my truly terrible predicament and absent-mindedly scratched my head with my left arm, it suddenly hit me. I still had my smartwatch strapped to my wrist. In the gloom, I managed to turn it on, and the screen's faint glow gave me just enough light to find my way. Using that little patch of light, I pulled the shower curtain back, located my phone on the sink, and used its flashlight to navigate out of the bathroom. I got myself back into my wheelchair, rolled to the room's entrance, and finally flipped the main light switch back on. I wrapped up my shower in under 5 minutes, hobbled over to the bed, and collapsed, utterly spent. The next day I finally made the journey home, boarding TK 1867 back to Italy. Somehow, against all odds, I survived. Now, every time I tell this story, people can hardly believe it, and honestly, sometimes even I can't believe it. Every word is true, and I still laugh at the memory of wrestling with modern technology, naked and soapy, in the dark. Update 1. So, remember how I thought my Japanese odyssey of broken bones and travel disasters was over? Yeah, well, the universe wasn't quite done with me yet. What I'm about to tell you makes everything I went through in Tokyo look like a pleasant vacation. I got home to Italy in early November, wheelchair-bound but grateful to be alive. My girlfriend Sarah had been texting me constantly while I was in the hospital, worried messages, "I love you, can't wait to have you home," the works. She even sent flowers to the hospital, though they never arrived, classic Japan post. I was actually looking forward to some tender loving care while I recovered. The first red flag should have been when she wasn't at the airport to meet me. "Traffic," she said. "I'll see you at home." Fair enough, Milan traffic is genuinely hellish. But when I finally wheeled myself through our apartment door at 11 p.m., she was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, barely looking up from her phone. "Oh, you're back," she said, like I'd been at the grocery store instead of fighting for my life in a foreign hospital for 3 weeks. The second red flag was the stack of mail on the kitchen counter. Bills, mostly. But there was something else, a credit card statement in Sarah's name that I'd never seen before. €4,200 in charges from October. Restaurants I'd never heard of. A hotel in Rome. Charges from the exact dates when I was lying in that Tokyo hospital bed, wondering if I'd ever walk normally again. "Sarah," I called from the kitchen, my voice carefully neutral. "What's this credit card?" The silence stretched for exactly 7 seconds. I counted. Then, "Oh, that. I needed to cope while you were gone. It was really stressful for me, you know? Stressful for her. While I was getting titanium rods drilled into my bones. But I pushed it down. Maybe she really was stressed. Maybe she needed some retail therapy to deal with almost losing me. I had bigger problems anyway, like the envelope that arrived 3 days later from my travel insurance company. Claim denied. Apparently, because that Tokyo police officer had noted alcohol involvement in his report, the report that was supposedly never filed, my insurance was voiding coverage. Never mind that I'd had 2 drinks over 4 hours. Never mind that the motorcycle was speeding with no headlights. Never mind that Japanese traffic law actually held the motorcyclist primarily at fault. The hospital bill was 24,800,000 yen. That's roughly 180,000 US dollars. For context, that's more than I make in 3 years. I called the insurance company, spent 4 hours on hold, and finally reached a representative who spoke to me like I was trying to scam them. Sir, alcohol was involved. The policy is very clear about this exclusion. I wasn't drunk, I explained for the 15th time. The officer made assumptions. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to work with our legal department. Legal department. Great. I hung up and immediately Googled bankruptcy lawyers near me. That's when Sarah walked in, coming home from work at 2 a.m. She worked at a marketing firm with normal hours. I asked where she'd been. Out with colleagues, she said, not meeting my eyes. You know how it is. I knew how something was, but it wasn't work drinks. The next morning, while Sarah was actually at work, I did something I'm not proud of. I went through her phone. She'd left it charging in the bedroom, and I'd noticed she'd been guarding it like state secrets lately. What I found made my broken bones feel like paper cuts. 3 months of messages with someone named Marco. Photos. Plans. Hotel reservations. Messages from when I was in Tokyo that made it crystal clear she wasn't just coping with stress, she was having a full-blown affair. The Rome hotel charges? Weekend getaway while I was getting surgery. The expensive dinners? Romantic dates while I was eating hospital food through a straw. But here's the part that actually made me sick. A message thread from October 20th, the day after my accident. Marco, so when is he coming back? Sarah, hopefully not for a while. Doctor says at least 6 weeks. We could go to that place in Tuscany you mentioned. Marco, perfect. My wife thinks I'm at a conference anyway. Oh, he was married too. Fantastic. I screenshotted everything, sent it to myself, and put her phone back exactly where I found it. Then I sat in my wheelchair in our living room for 2 hours, just staring at the wall, processing the fact that while I was fighting to save my leg, and possibly my life, my girlfriend of 4 years was planning romantic getaways with a married man. When she got home that evening, I was ready. We need to talk, I said. She immediately went defensive. What about? I pulled out my phone and showed her one of her messages to Marco. Just one. Her face went white, then red, then white again. It's not what it looks like, she started. It looks like you've been having an affair while I was hospitalized in Japan. You don't understand the pressure I was under, the pressure you were under? What followed was a screaming match that I'm sure our neighbors still talk about. She tried to flip it on me, how I was emotionally unavailable before the trip, how she felt neglected, how my accident had changed everything between us. Changed everything? I shouted back. I've been home for 5 days. She moved out the next morning. Took half our stuff, including the coffee machine and weirdly, all the good towels. Left me with a 180,000 euros medical bill and a wheelchair in an apartment I could barely afford on my own. But wait, it gets worse. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a Japanese law firm. Apparently, the motorcyclist was now suing me for damages. His insurance had covered his medical bills, but he wanted compensation for emotional trauma and lost wages. His lawyer spoke perfect English and seemed to know exactly how screwed I was with my voided insurance. Mr. Name, we understand your situation is difficult, but our client suffered significant trauma from this incident. We're prepared to settle for 5 million yen, that's about 35,000 US dollars. I laughed. Actually laughed. With what money? That's not our concern, sir. You have 30 days to respond. So now I'm sitting here, 3 months later, learning to walk again with a cane, living alone in an apartment that's too expensive, facing $250,000 in combined medical and legal bills, and my ex-girlfriend just posted vacation photos from the Maldives with her new boyfriend. Guess who? The physical therapy is going well, though. My leg works, mostly. I can walk short distances without the cane, and the doctors say I might even be able to lift weights again eventually. Small victories. I've started seeing a therapist, thankfully covered by our National Health Service, and she says I'm handling the trauma remarkably well considering everything. Apparently, near-death experiences put relationship drama in perspective. Who knew? The bankruptcy lawyer says I have options, but none of them are great. The Italian legal system moves slowly, and international medical debt is complicated. I might be paying this off for the next decade, assuming I can keep the Japanese lawyers from garnishing my wages. Sometimes I lie awake at night and think about the ghostly figure I saw in the building window right before the accident. I never did figure out what that was. Maybe it was trying to warn me, maybe it was death himself, checking his watch, thinking, not yet, but let's make this interesting. If that's the case, he succeeded. My life is definitely interesting now. The strangest part? I still want to go back to Japan someday. Not to the hospital, God, no, but to actually see the country I flew halfway around the world to experience. Maybe when I'm not broke and crippled and freshly betrayed. Maybe in another lifetime. Update, just as I was finishing typing this, my phone rang. Unknown international number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. It was the English-speaking surgeon from Tokyo. Apparently, He'd been following up on my case and had some news about the police report that might help with my insurance claim. Guess my story isn't over yet. Update 2. So that phone call from Dr. Yamamoto? Yeah, it wasn't the lifeline I thought it was going to be. Turns out, Japanese hospitals keep meticulous records of everything, and I mean everything. The good news, he had security footage from the street camera that clearly showed the motorcycle speeding with no headlights. The bad news, the footage also showed me stumbling slightly as I entered the crosswalk. Your gait appears unsteady, Dr. Yamamoto explained in his careful English. The insurance investigators will use this as evidence of intoxication, even though we both know 2 drinks over 4 hours wouldn't cause this. You were simply exhausted. Great, so I had evidence that could help my case, but it could also make things worse. My lawyer, yes, I finally bit the bullet and hired one, says it's a double-edged sword. We could fight the insurance denial, but if we lose, it confirms their alcohol narrative and makes the Japanese lawsuit even stronger. But here's where things get really interesting. Remember Marco, Sarah's affair partner? Well, turns out the universe has a twisted sense of humor. I was at physical therapy last Tuesday when my therapist, Elena, mentioned she was having relationship problems. She's helped me through some of my darkest moments these past few months, and we developed a friendship beyond the professional stuff. I told her I was probably the last person to give relationship advice, given my recent romantic catastrophe. It's just so humiliating, she said, adjusting the resistance on my leg machine. I found out my husband's been seeing someone. For months, while I was working double shifts to pay for his conference trips. Conference trips. My blood went cold. Elena, I said carefully. What's your husband's name? Marco. Marco Ricci. He works in marketing. Why? I stared at her for a solid 10 seconds. She's been helping me rebuild my leg while her husband was sleeping with my ex-girlfriend. The woman who abandoned me in a hospital bed halfway around the world was now destroying the marriage of the person who'd become my closest friend. I didn't tell her right away. How could I? But I went home and looked through those screenshots I'd taken of Sarah's messages. Sure enough, Marco Ricci. Marketing executive. Even a photo that I now recognized as Elena's husband. 2 days later, Elena came to our session with red eyes. He admitted everything, she said. Some woman named Sarah. He says it's over now, but... She trailed off. I made a decision that was probably stupid but felt absolutely necessary. Elena, I need to tell you something. I showed her the screenshots. All of them. The messages from when I was in surgery. The hotel bookings. The romantic dinners. The conversations about her husband's conference trips. She went very quiet. Then she started laughing, not happy laughter, but the kind that happens when life gets so absurd you can't process it normally. So while I was helping you learn to walk again, my husband was screwing the woman who abandoned you in a Tokyo hospital? Yes. That's exactly what happened. What followed was the strangest bonding experience of my life. We canceled the rest of my PT session and went to get coffee. Elena told me everything, how Marco had been distant for months, how he'd suddenly started caring about his appearance, how he'd been working late more often. Classic affair signs that she'd dismissed because she trusted him. You know what the worst part is? She said, stirring her espresso with more force than necessary. He told me it was because I'd become too focused on work. I was working extra shifts to save money for the house we were planning to buy. Over the next week, something unexpected happened. Elena and I started texting outside of our PT sessions. Not romantic stuff, we were both too emotionally destroyed for that, but we became genuine friends. She was going through a divorce, I was facing financial ruin, and somehow we found comfort in our shared disaster. But that's when things took another turn. Sarah called me last Friday. First time since she moved out. I heard you've been talking to Marco's wife, she said, no hello, no pleasantries. Her name is Elena. And yes, I told her the truth about what you two did. You had no right, I had every right. She was my therapist. She deserves to know why her marriage fell apart. There was a long pause. Then Sarah's voice changed, became almost pleading. Look, I know I screwed up, I know the timing was terrible. But Marco and we're serious now. He's leaving Elena for me. I almost dropped the phone. Sarah, I've seen Elena. She's devastated. And you're celebrating? It's not like that. It's just... Sometimes life is messy. Sometimes you find the right person at the wrong time. The right person. The man she was cheating with while I was getting my leg rebuilt with titanium. Are you calling me for forgiveness or to rub salt in the wound? Another pause. I'm calling because I heard about your insurance situation. And the Japanese lawsuit. I feel guilty about the timing. Guilty about the timing. Not guilty about the betrayal, not guilty about the affair. Guilty about the timing. What do you want, Sarah? Marco knows some people in the insurance industry. He might be able to help. And there it was. The real reason for the call. She wanted to ease her conscience by having her affair partner throw me a lifeline. I don't want anything from Marco, I said. Don't be stupid. You're drowning in debt. Let me help. You want to help? Tell the truth about what happened. Tell your boyfriend's insurance contacts that I wasn't drunk, that I was exhausted because I hadn't slept in 36 hours. Tell them the real story. I can't do that. It would hurt Marco's reputation if people knew about us. His reputation. While I'm facing $250,000 in debt. I hung up on her. But the call got me thinking, if Marco has insurance connections, and if he's feeling guilty about destroying my life while I was unconscious in surgery, maybe there's an angle here. Elena and I met for coffee yesterday to discuss it. She's surprisingly sharp about these things. Apparently you learn a lot about insurance fraud when you work in healthcare. Here's what I think, she said. Marco's going to want this whole mess to go away quietly. His wife finding out about the affair is one thing, but if his colleagues know he was sleeping around while his mistress's boyfriend was dying in a hospital? That's career-damaging stuff. She might be right. Marketing executives can't afford that kind of scandal, especially at his level. So we made a plan. Not blackmail, exactly, but leverage. Elena's going to approach Marco about the divorce settlement. She's going to mention, casually, that she knows about Sarah, about the timing, about everything. And she's going to suggest that if Marco really wants to make amends for the pain he's caused, he could use his insurance contacts to help me. It's morally gray, I'll admit. But I'm tired of being the victim in this story. The meeting is set for tomorrow. Elena says Marco turned pale when she mentioned my name on the phone. Meanwhile, Dr. Yamamoto sent me another email. The Japanese lawyer representing the motorcyclist has apparently been asking questions about my insurance status. If they find out I'm uninsured for the accident, they might increase their settlement demand. Everything feels like it's building to something. I just hope it's not another catastrophe. My leg's getting stronger, though. Walked 2 kilometers yesterday without the cane. Small victories.